Archaeologists opened a tomb in northern China and found a bronze bottle that should have been empty. The vessel had been buried for more than 2,300 years. Its narrow neck was still blocked by layers of fabric, mud, and organic material. When specialists examined it, they discovered that the seal had worked. Liquid was still trapped inside. It was pale blue-green, almost odorless, and there was enough of it to fill roughly 15 modern cups. At first, the obvious question was whether groundwater had leaked into the tomb. Then the laboratory results came back. The liquid contained more than 2,400 chemical compounds. Researchers found traces of millet, wheat, barley, amino acids, fermentation products, and thousands of microscopic yeast cells. This was not water that had entered by accident. It was an ancient cereal drink. In simple terms, it was beer. And the recipe had survived inside a grave, from the age when the Qin state was becoming one of the most powerful forces in China. The bottle came from Tomb M39 at the Shanjiabo cemetery. The cemetery contains 183 tombs and lies close to a defensive wall built by the ancient Qin state. The people buried there may have included both soldiers and civilians. Most were not emperors or legendary rulers. They were people who lived near a frontier, worked, ate, drank, and prepared their dead for another world. Inside one of those otherwise ordinary graves, someone placed a large bronze vessel filled with alcohol. Then they sealed it so carefully that part of its contents remained trapped until modern archaeologists arrived. If discoveries that preserve ordinary life from the ancient world are why you are here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because this bottle does not only contain an old drink, it contains evidence of a brewing tradition that was never fully recorded in surviving texts. The vessel itself offered the first clue. Its body was made from bronze, with a tall neck and an opening shaped like a head of garlic. Garlic-headed bronze bottles were used in ancient China to hold alcoholic drinks. They were designed for storing and pouring liquid, and examples have been found in graves connected with the Qin and neighboring states. But this bottle was unusual because it still held so much of its original contents. The opening had not been closed with a modern cork or metal cap. Instead, fabric was pushed into the neck. Mud, mixed with organic material, was packed over it. The two layers formed a tight barrier. That seal kept soil and water from freely entering the vessel. It also slowed the escape of the liquid inside. The people who closed it may not have intended to preserve the drink for thousands of years. They only needed it to remain sealed inside the tomb. Yet the method was effective enough to create a tiny protected environment. When researchers finally studied the liquid, its color did not resemble fresh beer. It was pale blue-green. That color probably came partly from long contact with the bronze container and the slow chemical changes that occurred underground. The drink had no strong smell. Any original foam, sweetness, alcohol, or aroma had disappeared or changed long ago. But chemistry can detect evidence that the senses cannot. Researchers compared the liquid with samples from the surrounding soil. If it had been ordinary groundwater, the chemical profile should have looked similar to the earth around the vessel. It did not. The liquid contained far more compounds than the control samples. More than 2,400 separate chemical signals were identified. Among them were amino acids, fatty acids, carbohydrates, and fermentation-related substances. The combination showed that the liquid had once been deliberately produced from grain. High levels of lactic acid and oxalic acid, together with low levels of tartaric acid, helped researchers rule out fruit wine. The drink had been cereal-based. The grains included broomcorn millet, wheat, and barley. Millet had been one of the most important crops in northern China for thousands of years. It grew well in relatively dry conditions and could be cooked as food or transformed into alcohol. Wheat and barley had arrived in China from farther west during earlier centuries and gradually became part of local agriculture. Inside this single vessel, crops with different histories were combined. The brewer was not simply soaking one grain and waiting. Several ingredients were selected to produce a particular result. The analysis also detected thousands of yeast cells. The reported count was 8,571. These were not living organisms, ready to restart fermentation. They were microscopic remains preserved in the ancient liquid, but their presence revealed that a powerful fermentation starter had once been used. Ancient Chinese brewers often relied on prepared starters containing molds, yeasts, and other microorganisms. The starter converted grain starches into sugars and then helped transform those sugars into alcohol. This allowed brewers to ferment solid grains without using the same process followed by most modern European-style beers. The Qin drink was therefore beer in the broad sense of a fermented cereal beverage. It was not a bottle of modern lager. There is no evidence that hops were used. It may have been thicker, cloudier, sweeter, and more sour than drinks sold today. Its strength is unknown. Its exact flavor is gone. But the surviving chemistry shows that it was carefully made. Researchers also found amino acids that may have been added to change the taste. That suggests the brewer was not only trying to create alcohol, the brewer was managing flavor. Successful brewing required observation and repeated experience. A batch that became sour, weak, or contaminated meant wasted grain. A reliable brewer needed to understand the process, even without knowing the modern science behind it. This bottle dates to the period between 547 and 221 BC. Those centuries saw the Qin state grow from a Western power into the kingdom that eventually unified China. The final unification came in 221 BC under Qin Shi Huang, the ruler whose vast mausoleum would later be guarded by the Terracotta Army. But before that moment, Qin had spent generations building an organized state on a contested frontier. Agriculture supported armies. Walls controlled territory. Officials recorded taxes and labor. Bronze workshops produced weapons, tools, and ritual objects. Alcohol belonged to this world as well. It could be consumed during meals. It could be served during ceremonies. It could mark agreements, victories, funerals, and offerings to ancestors. The bottle inside Tomb M39 was not thrown away. It was deliberately placed beside the dead. That decision transformed an everyday drink into a funerary object. The person buried there may have been expected to drink in the next life. The liquid may have been an offering made during the funeral. It may have represented hospitality, wealth, status, or a final connection between the living and the dead. Without an inscription, archaeologists cannot know which explanation is correct, but the quantity matters. Roughly 15 cups was more than a symbolic drop. Someone filled a substantial container. Then someone took the time to seal it. The burial shows that this drink was worth carrying underground and removing permanently from the living community. The cemetery itself may help explain why. With 183 graves, Shanjiabo was not a private royal burial ground. Evidence suggests it served a wider population that included local troops and civilians. That means advanced brewing may not have been restricted to palaces. A carefully made grain drink could have been available to ordinary communities living under Qin control. That does not mean everyone drank the same beverage. Ingredients, strength, and quality would vary. But this tomb shows that a complex multi-grain brew could reach someone outside the highest royal elite. The location near a Qin defensive wall adds another possibility. Frontier settlements brought different people together. Soldiers moved through them. Farmers supplied grain. Merchants carried goods. Officials enforced state authority. Travelers brought new ingredients and techniques. The use of millet alongside wheat and barley may reflect this exchange. Brewing methods can travel without leaving a written record. A brewer adopts a new grain, a family repeats a successful recipe, and over generations the technique becomes normal. Then the people who practiced it disappear, leaving only residue inside a sealed bottle. China has an even older history of fermented drinks. Chemical evidence from the Neolithic site of Jiahu shows that people were producing a mixed beverage from rice, honey, and fruit around 9,000 years ago. Later societies created grain alcohol for ritual feasts, ancestral ceremonies, and political gatherings. Bronze vessels became central to elite drinking and ritual traditions during the Shang and Zhou periods. The Shanjiabo bottle belongs to that long history, but it preserves something rare. Most ancient drinks disappear completely. Archaeologists usually find an empty vessel and study invisible residues attached to its walls. Here, there was still free liquid inside. That gave researchers far more material to analyze. They could examine acids, sugars, plant traces, proteins, microorganisms, and thousands of other compounds. The result is not a complete written recipe, but it is close to a chemical fingerprint. This is where the dramatic version of the discovery needs to slow down. The bottle did not contain fresh, drinkable beer. No one could safely pour it into a cup and taste the ancient world. 2,300 years of corrosion and chemical change have altered the liquid. The yeast cells are not proof that the drink could begin fermenting again. The measured compounds do not reveal every step used by the brewer. Researchers do not know the exact grain proportions, the water source, the fermentation temperature, the alcohol level, or how long the drink was stored before burial. Calling it beer is useful, but it can also create the wrong picture. This was not a clear golden drink with a foaming head. It was a cereal-based alcoholic beverage made through an ancient Chinese fermentation tradition. The evidence also does not prove that this exact recipe was used across the entire Qin state. One bottle preserves one batch from one tomb. More vessels must be studied before archaeologists can determine how common the method was. Still, the discovery gives direct evidence where written history is silent. The combination of broomcorn millet with wheat or barley and a powerful starter has not been identified as a Qin recipe in surviving historical texts. The brewer left no name. The person buried with the bottle left no explanation. Yet the chemistry preserves their decisions. Which grains were chosen, how the drink was fermented, how the vessel was sealed, and how much liquid was placed beside the dead. The seal may be almost as important as the drink. Fabric alone would not have stopped moisture. Mud alone could crack or shift. Together, they formed a flexible inner plug and a hardened outer layer. Organic material helped bind the seal. Similar closing methods have been found in ancient Chinese cemeteries. They show that people understood how to secure liquid containers for burial. The bottle survived because several choices worked together. A durable bronze body, a narrow neck, a layered seal, stable conditions underground, and pure chance. A small crack could have emptied it. A looter could have opened it. Ground movement could have broken the vessel. Water could have entered and destroyed the chemical evidence. None of that happened. For more than 2 millennia, the liquid remained in darkness while the world above changed. The Qin state conquered its rivals and became an empire. That empire collapsed. New dynasties rose. The wall near the cemetery lost its purpose. The people buried at Shanjiabo were forgotten. But inside Tomb M39, a drink prepared by an unknown brewer remained sealed. It may once have been served at a table. It may have been poured during a funeral. It may have been placed beside someone who believed death was another journey, requiring familiar comforts. The alcohol is gone. The flavor is gone. The hands that made it are gone. But the bottle still preserves the outline of the recipe. Millet, wheat, barley, a strong fermentation starter, added flavor, and a seal made carefully enough to defeat 23 centuries. The next investigation is waiting on screen now.